Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. This is one of our favorite conversations. It's a monthly third Wednesday chat with book authors. This today is a particularly exciting one because I think amongst both the moderator and the three speakers, there's about 20 books that have been authored. So there's some real heavyweight writers here and some really extraordinary pieces of work that we're going to be talking about, what their inspirations were, what tips and techniques they have, and probably well beyond that. So I'd like to introduce our esteemed moderator, Dr. Sarita Jackson of Grit. And I'll let her explain what grit is because I always get it wrong. But one of the things that impresses me so much about Sarita is she's so knowledgeable about international trade. And above and beyond that, she's so passionate and enthusiastic. And she's just a joy to work with. I had the pleasure of being with her in Anaheim, California last week as we greeted 500 Korean companies landing in the US and another 10,000 new friends of ours. And Sarita was just kind of gliding amongst all of them and just like a happy global environment. And so, Dr. Jackson, Sarita, thank you so much for all that you do. Thanks for your support and collaboration of Global Chamber. And we're really looking forward to today's conversation with these three book authors. Thanks for moderating.
Hey, thank you so much, Doug. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you, Doug, Gloria, and to all of our authors. I will be introducing you and our guests, everyone that's on the call for this morning, our book author series. I'll just briefly pick up where Doug left off, what Grit is. So I am the founder, president, CEO of the Global Research Institute of International Trade. So my focus is in the area of international trade, where we work with small, mid-sized companies, helping them to expand globally while also minimizing the risks of global expansion and maximize the opportunities with global expansion. So that's a little bit about my background. And so to continue on with today's session, I'm very honored and happy to moderate today's session with this panel of three extraordinary authors for the month of October. I was really excited to sign up for this, read all of the books, very, very excellent books. And I'm looking forward to speaking with each of the authors about their particular book, the inspiration behind the book, what we all can gain from the book, and the process, what their process has been from the writing and publishing perspective. And so just to give us just to connect all three, the theme as I went through each of the books and the connection is as follows: how we understand the world. That was so fascinating because my background is in political science. Yes, I do international trade from a business perspective, but my doctorate is in political science. And when I taught courses about international trade, it was from the international political economy or the larger international relations perspective. So I'm always looking at what's going on in the world. How do people perceive what's happening in the world? And that's what I found so fascinating about the connection on how we understand the world and how leaders can lead in today's environment, and then taking that information and turning your ideas into a book. So that's the connection between all three books. So just how we're going to do this today is I will introduce each author first, then I will engage in a dialogue with each of the authors for about 10 minutes. And then after that, we will open it up for question and answer or a discussion. So where everyone on the call can ask their questions or just engage with the authors. And that will be for approximately 15 minutes. And then after that, then we will go into our closing remarks. So first, I would like to introduce Anna Rosling Ronlund, who is the author of Factfulness: 10 Reasons We Are Wrong About the World and Why Things Are Better Than You Think. And this book was written along with the late Hans Rosling and Ola Rosling. She is the co-founder of Gapminder, which was founded in 2005. And its mission is to, quote, fight devastating ignorance with a fact-based worldview everyone can understand, end quote. Anna is now the vice president and head of design and user experience at Gapminder, and she also sits on the Gapminder board. Anna holds a master's degree in sociology and a bachelor's degree in photography. So starting with Anna, so that we can tell a little bit from the title what the book is about, but I want to just throw this, why this book and why now?
So yeah, hi everyone. So why? It's actually because we started our work trying to make the world easier to understand, trying to make the big global trends and proportions easier to understand for people. And we had a growing frustration that it felt like we never managed to tell the whole story. So eventually we thought maybe by writing a book, maybe we can get all bits and pieces together, because we have been sort of living a mixture of actually doing things in practice and visualizing data and then lecturing here and there, but trying to bring all that together and see if we could make something meaningful out of that. And we had started actually before the book, we had started testing people's knowledge about the world, basically fact check what people knew about the world. And our gut feeling before was that people were probably pretty wrong about the world, even those who should know the world they were making decisions about. So we started testing heavily and started realizing that people had a skewed worldview. So that was the starting point. How can we make people more aware that they are ignorant about the ignorance, and how can we, in an easy manner that is easy to read, sort of by use of examples, how can we create a playful learning experience, even though we talk about pretty dull subjects? I mean, you could call it a statistics book, right? But we tried to hide that by doing things around it.
Okay, so that leads to, you've mentioned 2 points, which leads to 2 things that I want to focus on, starting with the last point about a statistics book, right? And when you think about a statistics book, now I will admit I am one of those, I'm okay, I love data. I really, really do, and I'm looking at graphs and charts. But and you see this in the virtual background, what really caught my attention is the way that you presented the statistics in a different manner. And at the back of the book, you have this image on the 4 income levels to illustrate life at these 4 different income levels for 5 different areas. One, just access to drinking water, transportation, cooking, eating, and sleeping. So tell us about that. And the other thing, I intentionally did not mention it in the introduction because I wanted to relate it to this point. Tell us about Dollar Street.
Well, yeah. So, well, when we started working together, it was me, my husband, and my father-in-law. My father-in-law, he was a professor. My husband and I were like studying different things at the university. At that time, I was studying to become a photographer, but I was also working with the data visualizations that we were doing within Gapminder. And for me, it felt pretty obvious to actually, when we were working with the numbers alone, trying to visualize them, why not bring in the photography part? Basically, what we see in the news is always the extraordinary stuff. And I was interested in what would the sort of the different income levels roughly mean in everyday life for normal people globally. So we started a concept around that we call the dollar street, where we basically think of the world as it's basically an income axis, right? But we call it the dollar street to make it less dense. People get so afraid when they hear economy and accesses and stuff. So we call it the dollar street. And the whole idea is, imagine everyone in the world lives on Dollar Street, the poorest to the left, the richest to the right, and everyone else in between. And the neighbors on the street will be the ones on the same income level, independently of where in the world you are. So then, based on that concept, we started collecting homes. So now we have about 43,000 photos, I think, and 8,000 videos of everyday household functions that everyone needs to have independently of income level. So that is a project we have online that is free for anyone to use, and you're free to also add your own home if you would like that. So that was the whole starting point. And what you see here in the background is basically an imagery that comes from that project, where we put 5 different categories and try to show visually what lives look like on the different income levels.
Great, absolutely. So, yeah, so this is another way to think about or to really understand what's happening at the economic level with the photos. So thank you for clarifying that. And then the next point that I wanted to get on that talk about is this idea of ignorance. And I just want to just kind of pull the definition of how ignorance has been defined or was defined in the book, just basically the lack of correct knowledge about what is happening in the world, that it's not a question of intelligence, since, quote, everyone gets the world systematically wrong. And that is a point I just wanted to expand on, where the book talks about your involvement in the data analysis to, quote, measure ignorance systematically. So if you can discuss the process of how we actually measure ignorance, or how it is done in the book in a systematic way.
So honestly, when we wrote the book starts with a fact test consisting of 13 questions. Those questions are ABC questions, and the data that we're asking about is data that is produced by big data producers like the World Bank and the UN. And we check the numbers so that like researchers broadly would agree on both the question we have posed and the 3 alternatives, that they are far enough away from each other and they are reasonable, right? So that is the core part. So it's already published data from big data producers that the researchers we have contacted have, I mean, no issues with. Of course, no data is going to be perfect ever, but it's sort of good enough, right? So that is the data. And we ask questions in several different fields. And we basically checked the A, B, and C alternatives and saw that most people, the vast majority, are actually getting the questions totally wrong, and they get them wrong independently. I mean, we checked in several different countries, and we get almost the same result in different countries, and we checked in several prestigious conferences as well, and get the same bad results, so to say. So this has nothing to do with intelligence, just as you said, or educational levels. It's something with how our brain is dealing with information that we are bombarded with from the media and from the news. And it seems like it sort of skews itself in our brains. I mean, the good news is that this information is pretty easy to get correct, as long as we realize that we are probably wrong about it, that it's pretty easy to fix. The problem seems to be that most of us are not aware that the world seems to in the data look different than in our perception of the world.
Right. Right. Thank you so much for that. And I just have to just clarify that point, that there's the perception versus, and as you described, the questions, the facts of how things are going in the world, whether it's going to poverty levels, population growth, things of that nature. So thank you for sharing that. Now I want to turn to your experience of writing the book for many of our current authors and potential authors. And I found the outro very, very touching when you were talking about writing this book with your father-in-law at that particular time. So if you can discuss that and your own inspiration as you participated in this project.
So, well, when we started the project, when we decided to write the book, then Hans hadn't gotten his basically he got a diagnosis that he was terminally ill, and we didn't know if he was going to live a few weeks, a few months, or maybe at most a year. That was when we had just started the writing process. So the timing of someone becoming really ill is always bad. But in this case, it was actually pretty bad, I have to say, because not only were we colleagues, we were also family, right? And balancing that, whether we should continue to push for the book or if we should stay back and make sure that everyone got their space to, you know, spend time together with, yeah, that I think was the first hard decision, how we were gonna proceed, right? But we knew, including Hans. Hans had always been stubborn and loved working. So we sort of realized that the best way of actually making this happen is to make sure that we are actually writing the book together and making sure that we're actually finishing it. So we wrote together for a year with Hans, because he actually got a full year to live. But when he passed away, we still had a lot of work left. So you could say that we had the outlines ready, but we spent another year actually refining after he passed away. So he never got to see the final version, but he got to see a I don't know what you say, but in the middle of the process. So I mean, we came pretty far, but I think me and my husband, we had no idea it would take another year to actually finalize everything, but that was sort of the rough process. And none of us had ever wanted to become an author. We had gotten, people had told us before that they wanted us to write a book, and we always said we didn't want to. Both my husband and Hans are dyslexic, and none of us are big readers, I would say. In that sense, we quite often listen to books, but we're not reading that much, actually. So in many ways, it was sort of, it was not the expected outcome. So we were pretty surprised then when the book got so popular. So then you could say we became some kind of accidental writers. We tried everything else first.
Oh, that's really interesting. I would have never given that, because I do have the hard copy, and I'm one of those, I read a lot, so I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
And
that's
then,
the honest answer, yeah.
no, I appreciate that. And then just one question, now that you mentioned that you weren't, this was not really something that you were thinking about becoming an author, but then there's also the other side. Once the book is finished, if you have any tips just from your journey on actually getting the book published.
What do you mean by getting it published? How
So,
to get
yeah,
it
so
published?
in terms of finding a publisher and finding the right publisher to get the book actually published and
So
marketed.
then I can tell you, I'm probably the worst one giving you advice there. Basically, we had no idea how you go about to do this. So we asked a friend who's actually into collectors, really old books. And he told us, he's a Swede, and he told us, since you're working globally, you should make sure that you're not writing the book from Sweden in Swedish. You should write it in English immediately. And we thought that sounded reasonable. But then how do you connect with publishers? We had no idea. So we asked the only one we knew who knew anyone being an agent in the US. So he said there was an agent, Max Brockman, that we should contact. So we contacted him, and then he was interested. So that is it, right? So I mean, it's these two people that we know that had their two suggestions. Write it in English, try to contact someone abroad. The only person we got advice to contact, we contacted, and that worked. So I mean, I would honestly say I still have no idea if that is how you do it, but that was how it happened for us.
Okay. And thank you for sharing that. And then just my last question as we wrap up is, okay, so this book came out in 2018. Here we are 5 years later. Just to give a few statistics where you're talking about where a lot of people in the different countries did not perform as well on the questions that were asked. It ranged from 2% that got the answers correct from in Hungary, 5% in the United States, 25% in Norway and Sweden. Where are we 5 years after this publication of this? Any changes in the statistics or anything that you have observed since the book came out?
So when we wrote the book, we had 13 fact questions. Since then, we have tested 10,000 other fact questions in many fields based on the UN goals, the Sustainable Development Goals. We have tested in every single category they have, and we have tested in several countries. And because we were interested if these trends were actually going to apply in other fields as well, where we hadn't tested yet. So since we wrote the book, we have tested intensively, and I would say that we see the same trends continuing. People are pretty wrong about a lot of things, especially people seem to be overly negative about human progress. They seem to be more correct when it comes to nature and the climate, in the sense that they are answering in a negative way on those questions too, which is quite often correct, right? Because the trends there are not as good. And then if it's something that is more futuristic, like more sci-fi oriented, cool new technologies, cool new green energy and stuff, people seem to overestimate how far we have come. So that is where we stand now. So we have tested extensively, and we're now in the phase of actually processing the data and create something out of it. So you can actually go online to our website and try test. I think we have 2,000 questions there now that you can test yourself if you want to. We do not collect those answers actually, but we do polls via polling agencies to actually test to get our results. But if you want to test yourself, you can go there and try it out. So you can see the variety of questions we have. So that is where we stand now. So let's see if we're gonna what we're gonna do with the results. Most likely we will try to do something else than writing a book again, and most likely it will I guess it will become a book eventually anyways. So.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that. So I encourage everyone to definitely check out this book so that you can get all of the 10 reasons why we're wrong about the world, gain the pertinent and credible facts to enhance our accurate understanding of the world, and details about how we can put factfulness into practice. And so that leads me to our next author. Anna talked about this perception of the world, sometimes very negative. And our next author, Donald Laughlin, and I will relate how this relates to his work, but I want to do a quick introduction. Donald Laughlin, author of Leadership, Broken, Rebuilding Leadership in a Dynamic World. Currently, Donald is the managing director of EDGI, Don't Be in the Middle, and the president CEO of White Mountain Economic Development. And each of these organizations focus on developing people and scaling organizations needing all forms of direct assistance in expansion, strategy, finance, and capital raising. And so, Donald, this leads into the quote from your book. When we let ourselves miss the advances that have been made and only see this as a negative, we are doing ourselves and everyone around us a disfavor. So building off of our conversation with Anna, this provides, you're also talking about things are improving. So share with us the reasons for writing this book and the intended audience.
First, greetings, everybody. Really pleased that everyone is participating this morning, and love the fact that we're having this conversation. Thank you, Global Chamber, and Doug, and Gloria, and Sarita for moderating. So the reason for this book is I've been a corporate officer for 20 years. I have a couple master's degrees, and so I've seen a lot of different things inside of multinational organizations. And since COVID, almost every leader that I know of, and you can extrapolate the broader definition, obviously, of leaders, is more challenged, more stressed, requires more ability to deal with dynamics and more challenges. The interest rates have compressed profit and margins. Many people have to do more with less. And so I've always been a student of leadership and of the process. And even right now, just this morning, I did a search on Google for the word leadership. and 7.4 billion responses come up. And we talk about leadership all the time, aspects or applications, but we don't talk about what's the foundational leadership model. Why? What is it about leadership? How do you actually define beginning to end what leadership is from a foundational standpoint, and then attribute all these other things to it, like identity or application to raising capital or application to understanding the world around us? Thank you, Anna. Thank all of those kinds of things. And so I actually created a leadership model, boiled it down to how it impacts the world around us, how it impacts leaders, created a leadership assessment, and then ended up writing a book about it all. But interestingly enough, that's not quite accurate. I began with writing the book just because it was kind of a passion project about leadership. And so that's how I kind of walked myself into this whole process. And it's ended up being so very valuable on so many levels. And I think that I would encourage people to write books because it brings out different aspects of yourself that you don't even know exist. I like Anna, I didn't originally intend to be an author at all. I found myself really interested about a set of particular subjects, and I started writing. Some books were a lot easier than others, and I'm happy to contribute whatever I can to support and encourage others in that process. It is well worth the time and the effort, and don't surprise yourself. As Anna reflected, it is a labor of love. After you create a manuscript and go through it 5,000 times, it is a process and truly a journey. But and I know that's a little bit broader, Sarita. Please direct me again in your wonderful way. But that's maybe a few opening comments.
Okay, great. No, thank you so much for sharing just how you got to this point, what drove you to write this book. But I do want to back up where you were talking about leadership, how, different people define leadership in different ways. And so your book is presenting a foundational model. So my question to you is, explain what you mean by leadership. How do you define leadership for all of our understanding?
So in my mind, I define leadership as the ability to recognize situations around you that need solutions. Because if we think about it, any situation that we find that needs a solution almost always across the board involves more than one person. And if it involves more than one person, it's an opportunity to impact that person's lives. So many times inside of organizations, you're affecting the whole organization or a department or a group of people. And how you walk through that process, we frequently don't think of as a leadership activity. But in reality, whether or not you're the person calling the shots or the person supporting the action, the person gathering the data, the person creating the reports, the person doing any of those things, you're affecting all the people around you. Think of it from the standpoint of how an attitude is infectious. We've all worked with people that are really negative. We've all worked with people that are just exuberant and overly positive. Well, who'd you rather work with? Not even a question, right? And so that ability to impact people, I think, is something that is such a key component of leadership that we often bypass in the whole process. And if we can get our arms around really what the foundational definition of leadership is, which is the whole point of the book and the assessment, then we can come back to leadership, rebuild what leadership is about, train new competency. And what I've discovered is in many organizations, we all know there's different levels of leadership. There's the new supervisor that's kind of in the beginning level, and there's the tenured people that have been around for a long time that theoretically have a higher level of leadership. Well, how do we, as people that are guiding this process, help all levels of leadership and rise the tide so that wherever people are at in this process, they get brought along. We train the new generation of leaders. We as peers help encourage each other and push people forward. How do we take on the challenging subjects of how we are managing our organizations and seeking to impact those that either work for the organization or what we're seeking to do as an entity. So that's all combined inside, and it's a complex kind of question. It's a complex kinds of issue. And that's why it's challenging and both rewarding and personally validating at the same time.
Okay, great. Now, so that helps us to understand, what you mean by leadership. And when you and I spoke earlier, I mentioned that as I was reading the book, one of the things that I was reading for, and I did get to that section, was about how all of this applies in the cross-cultural context, which you mentioned when discussing the human factor as one of the approaches to understanding leadership at the beginning of your book, and then in greater detail later in the book as a part of the fourth stage. Now, explain how your book helps leaders operating in the international context.
So there are if we approach this from the standpoint of, okay, so great question. 2 comments. Inside of the international context, there are certain organizations that have created different ways of defining the dynamics and factors that create our culture internationally. How is Japan different than the United States? How is Greece different than the United States? How is, choose any nation in the world? And and they have done, from an academic and very practical standpoint, a fabulous job to help us understand what are the dynamics and how is each culture different from each other from a high level understanding. And I have a couple of different sources that I use. And so from the application of leadership cross-culturally, we have to be very aware of how we approach things differently. We have a different worldview. We have a different level of assertive or aggressive kind of context. We have a different level of social relationship. What is in the Asian world, we know that there's the saving face, and that's very different in the Western world. We have to have some sensitivity to those kinds of things, and these organizations that I'm referring to have done a fabulous job categorizing that kind of information. I have a couple sources that I use. Happy to share that with people if you're interested. The other thing is, I think we as humans are quick to overly, so I'm going to go from one side of the continuum to the other side of the continuum. The other side is we are quick as humans to classify and attach value to something errantly. And so just because someone maybe looks different than us, or approaches something different than us, or has a different perspective of the world, or has a different value, way of valuing things, we automatically classify them as different and therefore bad. Now, in reality, it's like Anna was talking about ignorance. Ignorance isn't actually a valuative word. Ignorance actually says someone doesn't know something, but we interpret it as with a negative connotation. We do that across our lives. We're all biased in amazing, profound ways. And so I think the purpose of my book is also to boil that down and say, let's have a way to approach these issues without judgment. When we are able to let go of classifying value based on differentness to recognizing value and different perspectives, then we do ourselves and everything we're doing a profound benefit. Why? Because it allows us to impact and affect change and growth and development. Again, it all boils down to that. How do we impact change and growth and development? So that's how I approach the international, as well as even things going on inside the United States, because we have lots of different dynamics and issues and challenges where it's easy to classify and value, which I don't think that's really a positive thing.
That is beautiful. So I'm just going to leave it at that about the change, growth, and development. How do we address that?
Yeah.
So after that, all I can say is this is a very, very useful book. I encourage everyone to get a copy, check out the 7 foundational steps in the leadership process, and check out additional resources from the book. Donald, you might want to put in the link in the chat, the www.edgy.us, so that you can really interact both all of the books. So the next one is just as interactive, but at least the first 2 that we've talked about, yeah, where there are additional resources so that you're not just reading and getting the information, but you're actually interacting with the information and building with the whole goal of actually doing something with this information. So thank you so much, Donald, for that.
Absolutely.
Now we're going to move to our next author. And so let me tie this back to our first book again. In Factfulness, there is a quote: understanding the world is one thing, turning that understanding into a book is another. So this is a great segue to our next author, Kathy Fayok, author of Writer Crisis Hotline, The Write, WRITE, Solutions for Authors, along with Ali Pleiter. So Kathy Fayok is the business book strategist and works with professionals and thought leaders who want to write a book as a business development strategy. Since the beginning of her business in 2014, she has helped over 200 professionals become published authors. She believes that we all have a purpose and that our stories are the way in which we share our truth with others. And she is certain that authors can and do change, as Donald just talked about, change the world one word at a time. So welcome, Kathy. So, oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm so new to this Zoom thing. Not.
So my question to you is the same question that I posed to the other authors. Why this particular book and why now?
Well, my co-author, Ali Pleiter, she is a full-time writer, and we collaborate together on retreats, and we have a group coaching practice together. And one of the things we have been so fascinated with is that so many authors come to us thinking they are the only ones. I'm the only one experiencing the imposter syndrome. I'm the only one struggling with guarding my writing time and making that sacred space, or everybody thinks they're the only one who has this problem. And what we have discovered is that there's something powerful about letting folks know that it is normal in the writing process to have these feelings of lack of confidence, of being the imposter, of feeling like we can't get it all done. So we decided to write this book, Writer Crisis Hotline, which just came out last week, by the way. And it is a #1 bestseller on Amazon in 3 different categories. So we were super excited about that. But we really wanted a way to talk people off the ledge, because that's a lot of what we do as book coaches, is we help people get over that feeling like, I can't write one more word, I can't look at this thing one more minute, or whatever it might be. So this is the book to help all of those folks who know they have a book inside them, but for whatever reason are finding it very challenging to get it done.
Okay, so I want to build off of that, where you say that you are not alone. And for me, when I went through your book, what really caught my attention that made it real as to why should I listen to Kathy and Ali on this particular topic is that you share up front, quote, we've been there. We have faced these obstacles ourselves. So, and each chapter, as you just mentioned, addresses the common issues that get into our psyche for those that want to be the writers and authors. And I like the way that you have it structured into 5 themes. So I'm curious as to which are some of the obstacles listed, and there are many. What are the top 1 or 2 obstacles that you face that are listed in the book, and your tips for overcoming some of those obstacles?
Well, one of the biggest obstacles, because I am working with busy professionals who are consultants, who are coaches, who are speakers, who are experts in their field. They're very busy. So who has time to write? So one of the big issues is I don't have time. How can I get a whole book written when I really don't have time? And I love this chapter. It's actually chapter, I had it marked here for us. It's on page 103. I don't have time, I can't get it done. So we say this is a common issue, but there are so many strategies. For example, in our group coaching practice, we do 2-minute writing prompts. And you might think, well, what can you really do in 2 minutes? But it is amazing how a really focused period of time, a very finite writing focus or topic, and it's amazing what folks can write in even 2 minutes. We also do a 20-minute writing time together. And I've had folks do over 1,000 words in 20 minutes. And that's because the practice of just being totally focused on writing, not being distracted, not putting it off, knowing that you only have X number of time to write, it creates this sense of urgency, and it will block other things, including your internal editor that has a way of getting in the way of writing. So thinking about shorter blocks of time, some of my authors have given themselves too much time actually to write. They blocked out 4 hours, and it's not realistic that I don't think most people can write in a 4-hour block. Most people are much more effective if they have an hour or even 30 minutes or maybe up to 2 hours, but not 4 hours. So finding the right block that works for you, getting clear on your thesis, and then having very specific goals. Tracking your progress is another strategy I think that's really important. So watching as you sit down to write, if you have a 30-minute block or an hour block, notice your energy level, notice your word count productivity, and these are some strategies to get you through. So that's just one of the issues that I think is definitely universal among my authors, at least.
Great. And so I also want to bring in the idea, and I love that your book addressed this, was about ghostwriters and artificial intelligence, AI. So if you can share your thoughts with the audience about the use of a ghostwriter or AI during the writing process.
I think AI can be a wonderful tool, emphasis on the word tool, to get a springboard thinking about new ideas. I certainly have used a lot of AI strategies for helping me, like write the book summary and write about the author and some of those marketing tools. I'm not a big fan of either ghostwriting or AI for writing the content. I think, and Donald said something about this earlier, about the transformative power of writing. And I tell my authors, you are missing a huge opportunity if you don't write it yourself. There's something about the process of clarifying what's important, of clearing away the non-essentials. That is so important for us, especially if we're going to be consulting, speaking, coaching, helping others with our topic. So you're cheating yourself if you don't write your book yourself. So I suggest no ghostwriters. The other thing is, I think that it's hard for someone else to get your voice just perfectly. And most of the authors that I have talked with that have tried to use a ghostwriter end up not going in that direction because it just doesn't sound like them. It just didn't capture who they were. And it doesn't capture the story that you are wanting to share as authentically as if you're telling your own story. So I'm not a big fan of ghostwriting. I'm not a big fan of AI, except as a tool.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that, the importance of your authentic voice in the writing process. And so I'm going to wrap it up so that we can bring others into the discussion, but just to a quick summary from our discussion with Kathy, that there is no reason to not start and finish your book. And her book is very well organized into key themes such as having a plan and addressing all of the common issues that come, and she's holding up the book, that arise, such as finding the time to write. So I would like to thank all of the speakers for engaging with me prior to today, because I really enjoyed those discussions, as well as in this enlightening discussion. I also want to thank Gloria for your efforts leading up to today's session. So I want to open it up with the time that we have to see if anyone has any questions, comments, and anything that you would just like to discuss with our authors. And I am looking in the chat. Okay, great. And I see all of the resources from our different authors. So are there, you can just go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to just mention one thing, is that this book, this most recent book, as well as several of my more recent books, have been co-written. So having a collaborator is so much fun, and it lightens the load and it broadens your perspective. It makes the marketing part easier. So I really, really love having a co-author. And so I just wanted to offer that up there as a possibility for others as you're thinking about your next book or the first book. It's a great way to get a book written.
Great. No, that's a very, very important part. The collaborative process as well goes back to, you don't have to do this alone. Okay. Any questions? Anybody? Questions? Thoughts?
Yeah,
Jacob.
if I can ask a question, like this sort of goes sort of tied to, I wouldn't say ghostwriting, but like let's say, you know, you have really good ideas, you have a really good concept, you have it well thought out, and the story is planned, a lot of it could be even written. Do authors like, but you don't want to be front and center and like have to thing that goes along with, you know, writing a book and having success tied with it. And so do authors, can you like sell or provide these concepts or stories to up and coming writers, or are there options like that, and then like maintain like a certain amount of equity of sales? Is that thing that authors or some people do that have good stories but might not have the time or energy to go through the whole process?
I'm going to just say no, because part of what sells a book is not the great story. It's that it's your passion as the author of that story, and as you take it out there. So it's you're speaking about it, you're consulting about it, you're coaching about it. It's author powered. So it might be possible. I mean, there may be someone out there that makes it work, but I'm going to say generally no. The power of your idea is you putting it out there in the world and you promoting it and you championing that idea. So that's at least my 2 cents.
There's not a better example than Anna and Hans. You know, Hans was a force of nature, you know, and it came across in everything that he did. And Anna, I wonder how have you channeled that, his directivity and how he was so focused. And one of our members is a guy named Rami Goldratt, who is the son of Eli Goldratt, who was a very famous business improvement, wrote The Goal, one of the most successful business books of all time. And similarly, he was channeling a little bit of his dad. He actually, in many ways, came out better in the sense of feeling more like a human being, if you will. I don't mean to say that negatively. It's just that Eli was such an evangelist, just like Hans was. But then the people that can follow don't need to be so evangelical, and they can have a little bit more flexibility in the personality and the communication theme. Is that what you found?
So thanks for asking. No one has asked that question, I have to say. So we have been working with Hans for 20 years before we wrote the book together, right? And I would say that both me and Ola, we were behind the scenes trying to make that force that Hans was to actually be a little bit more structured. And we were giving him tools, and we were giving him scripts, and we were doing things. We tried to do our best directing parts of his work, right? So I think in many ways it was a luck for the book that because we've always been working very closely together, and it has been wonderful and horrific at the same time, you could say. So I mean, we had very high emotions, you could say, at least, when we've been fighting over different kinds of concepts. So I do think it was actually pure luck that we were struggling and fighting together to find a baseline, what the book should be, and we took it pretty far. But I do think actually it was good for the book that me and Ola got a year extra to actually polish it, because how could he being that force of a personality, he actually sometimes slept too little and could be very passionate in a certain direction, but he could also change pretty rapidly. So I think, yeah, I think it turned out to the best. And when it comes to ghostwriters, I just want to say that we actually had one more person in the stew. So that was actually basically a ghostwriter, but I wouldn't say she didn't write the story at all, but she was an English speaker, which none of us are. And people often make fun of us because our Swinglish way of using the English language. So you could say that she actually helped us in the process to get our tone to be not so Swinglish in a few places where we would have written it even a little bit more Swinglish. So that also, I think, was a good collaboration. So when you talked about collaborating, Kathy, I really have to say that it has been, I both hated and enjoyed the experience, but it was actually pretty fantastic we were 4 people on board in a sense, right? Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. And The Goal, by the way, I really like that book.
Me too. Absolutely. Yeah. Kathy, did you have any response to that? Because that's right in your wheelhouse.
No, I think that, yes, collaborating can be both exhilarating and exhausting because, you know, you have to find the common ground. Or what Ali and I found, sometimes we had difference of opinion, but we included that and had that be a part of the dialogue to say, this is the way I do it, but this is the way Ali does it. And that gave at least readers a little more ideas that it's not just one way. It's not just, you know, there's not just one way to get your book written. So
I know, Sarita, we're wrapping up. I think Gloria wanted me to say what next month is, and then how about I do that and then turn it back over to you and Gloria for final words and wrapping up today. I also want to mention two things. One, something Anna said was to me very reassuring from the standpoint of not being a reader and doing it by audiobook. Similar to me, I have a hard time reading, and maybe I'm dyslexic, I don't know, but I just can't. And so audiobooks has been a savior. So the Libby app in particular has been amazing. So the last two books, the Nelson Mandela autobiography, and now I'm pretty much through the Barack Obama one, have been just amazing to listen to. And so I highly recommend the Libby app. One thing that Barack Obama mentioned that also was inspiring was he talked about when he was a senator and he was traveling around Africa and he was like doing 1,000,001 things. He was writing his book, his second book, and he actually sent the book from Djibouti. So he went to his home country of Kenya and he was traveling around. He was in Djibouti. He was writing every day. And so, Kathy, thanks for that 30 to 120 minutes per day advice. That's, I think, very helpful. And it reminds me of what he must have been doing as well, just when you can. Next month, it's another really extraordinary conversation. It's moderated by Christelle Damiens, who's from France, but she's living in Australia, and she's an amazing expert on exporting from anywhere to Europe to the EU, and she's an author herself, of course. And the three authors she's interviewing and talking to are Erica Herval, who has a book coming out, Bill Foch, who's a multiple books, and he's an expert on particularly probably the most world-renowned person on company management to employee relations and how that works. And then Barbara Peters. Barbara Peters is unbelievable in so many different ways. She is the owner of the Poison Pen bookstore. She reads 300 books a month. At least that's the rumor I heard from her husband, who I've been working with for many years. I don't know how that's even possible, but I would like to have that be one of the questions. Her husband is pretty amazing too. He runs Poison Pen Publishing. And so both of them are like heavyweights and they're amazing, but Barbara will be here next month and we're looking forward to that. Dr. Jackson, Sarita, do you have any closing comments? This was an extraordinary conversation and you are an amazing facilitator and moderator. I'm just in wonderment of how well you did today. Thank you so much. You're really amazing.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Doug, for always your support and programs such as this for your Global Chamber members and others in the community that are visiting. And then also, Gloria, I'll turn it back over to you, but I definitely want to say thank you for leading this particular effort. And my only comments, just as we wrap it up for everyone that's on the call, that today you have some true gems that were on the call. Look in the chat, all of the resources, and I really encourage everyone to follow up. If you have any additional questions, to reach out to our authors, utilize their resources, and take all of this information, put it into action, and then support our authors, because there's also one other thing that I want to mention. Any of the books that you may already have, had looked at, or go ahead and buy, whether it's the hard copy like myself or the audio, whichever you choose to do, however it's available. To once you read or listen to the books, then definitely give a review for some of the authors that participate in this author series. So that's my last comment. And then I will turn it over to Gloria. Thank you so much.
I'm going to be very quick because there's construction noise going on in the background and it's very quiet just for a second here. But thank you everyone for attending. I think I see some newbies in the group. Thank you for coming. And just a reminder that this has been taped. And I did notice when I go to Global Chamber's YouTube channel that people are watching on their own time frame. So if Monday or Wednesday mornings at this time isn't good, some people are watching at different times during the day, but they are being viewed. And so everything that is shared will live on forever and be a great resource. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you,
Thank
Sarita.
you.
Thanks, Anna, Donald, Kathy. Thanks, everybody.